All right, this is going to be a fun one. We're going to dig into organizational pitching tendencies. This information is not actually public. I got it from an internal source of mine. So let's take a look through it. I posted some of this on Twitter already, but I wanted to give more expansive thoughts on a few teams. Let's get it going. This is exciting. All right, what do I mean by organizational tendencies? What I did was essentially got Class A to Triple A, combined all that data together, and had it outputted based on pitch type and some variables here: usage, velocity, vertical movement, extension, release height, right? Just pretty basic things for each pitch type. And I also have results. This is not including the major league levels. This is very like an organizational minor league kind of focused idea to talk through how different teams approach pitching development, regardless of what they say they do. I think that's maybe the key thing that this allows us to do, is to look objectively at what they are doing and maybe try to make some inferences off that. I'm also gonna be writing down my notes as I go here to kind of help you guys follow along. In this Google Doc, you'll see some of the teams I'm gonna hit on based on things that jumped out to me, and then just some overarching thoughts maybe on fastballs and sliders. It's kind of loose. It's a loose structure in terms of what we're gonna talk through. So let's get it going, and we're gonna start with the Mariners, who have the weirdest approach. Not the weirdest approach. I don't know whether it's good or bad. It's just unique. It's different. So what I'll do is I'll highlight the Mariners name here. I'll highlight this name. And we're just going to talk fastballs here first. And we'll go, okay, so fastball usage here. All right, watch the orange. That's the Mariners. Descending based on usage. They're the lowest in baseball in the minor leagues by 13%. That is, like, you see the average here is somewhere around, what is this? Somewhere around like 41% fastball usage. That's low. Like the major league average, I think actually might be a little bit higher off the top of my head. But this is four-seam fastballs. 20% four-seam fastballs is crazy. It's unique. It's 13% less than anyone else in baseball. The Guardians are at top at 50. It's actually funny, two of the best pitching development orders in baseball, the most fastball usage. And then another team in baseball that I think for the most part has developed pitching pretty well, all the way down at 20% usage. That 30% four-seam fastball usage difference is massive. So we could chart and just say lowest four-seam usage at 20%. Okay, one trend. The second trend I want to point out is I believe they actually have really low release heights, which gets to a larger point. Yeah, lowest release height, lowest four-seam release. So I think what you're starting to maybe infer already is that they just don't value backspin that much, right? And as we're gonna take a look at what sliders in a second, this team throws a ton of sliders, no four-seam fastballs. And I think the logic is thinking, if you want to throw a lot of sliders, I think that's maybe their North Star, is just throw sliders, throw a lot of them. And they're working backwards from that. They're finding the pitchers who they think have good slider field shape, spin, velo, force shape, etc. And then building maybe the repertoire back off that, such that it's hard. Like if you're using a stuff model and valuing off sliders, you know, and these guys are throwing sweepers and nasty sweepers, and maybe some guys are throwing bullets that actually could pick up some sweep. Those guys are probably more on the side of the ball. They're getting around the ball such that it's hard for them to create that carry. Therefore, what happens, as I now jump to sinkers, is that they can't really pronate. You know, this is sliders. And we'll go sinkers first. I don't want to spoil sliders. Let's find Seattle again. There we go. Sinker usage. Yeah, tops in baseball, right? That is number one in baseball. There we go. Sliders, sinkers. Cool. 21%. That makes sense. Those tie together to me. The fact that they're not throwing four seams, they still need to throw some kind of fastball. Combined between sinker and four seam, they're throwing 30, 50, what is that, 51% four seam? That's not crazy. That's probably, you know, that's good. I think that's mostly makes sense. But the key here is that their slider usage is driving, in my opinion, their fastball usage. The fact that, again, low release height guys, creating more sink. Generally, that slot is hard to get behind the ball. You can't develop a ton of Josh Haders, who's low slot, but able to orient and get some carry. Hader actually throws a two-seam oriented pitch anyways. It's besides the point. Again, sinkers, we'll chart this down. Sinker, we'll go highest sinker usage at 21%. And now, the key to all this working for the Mariners is the amount of sliders they throw. It's pretty wild. I love looking at this. This is like my favorite thing to look at in terms of data, is organizational tendencies. One more time, we'll highlight them off. And it's the highest in baseball. It's been the highest in baseball for 2 years in a row. Their gap is pretty nice. Atlanta, number 2. Yankees, number 3. It's a lot of sliders, man. It's 36%. You know, that's a lot. And again, I think at the end of the day, what they're looking at, the Mariners, is that sliders are probably the best pitch in most counts to generate swing miss, and probably from a contact quality standpoint, limit more barrels. Let's throw a ton of sliders. Let's identify players who can throw really good sliders and then work backwards from there. This may run contrast to what they do at the major league level. That's, I think, the thing maybe I also want to point out. You have Bryce Miller, George Kirby, Emerson Hancock, a lot of guys who don't have big sweepers and throw sliders, perhaps a ton, who actually work with really good fastballs. So one thing to keep in mind throughout this is the difference maybe at the major league level, and also the difference between starting pitcher development and more so maybe just arm development generally. I think maybe the Mariners look at it as a whole approach of just throwing more sliders, less four seams, more sinkers. That arm profile, we think we could either drive up the value to have Dipoto trade them, or, you know, maybe they just genuinely believe in their stuff models and they have that North Star, which is just sliders are the best pitch. Let's throw them as much as possible. So most slider usage, 36%. This is the most unique team we'll talk about in this video, is digging through them. They're wild in what they do. I love it. I just love it. I love uniqueness in terms of approach, especially when you contrast it with other teams. Let's go to the Dodgers next. Dodgers are an interesting team. We could start with their fastball usage. And I'm realizing now I probably should have done this green. So let's change this together and we'll call that green. And let's go Dodgers, who's blue. Actually, no, you know, it might be best to unhighlight this totally. We'll go no fill. Where are my Dodgers? Dodgers here. Dodgers. We'll go Dodger blue. With a lighter blue. Dodgers. Okay. Middle of the road slider usage. The thing I want to point out, again, the Dodgers love velo. Velo development for them is huge, I think. This comes up in a couple of their pitch types. Slider velo is the highest, so highest slider velo. We'll go 83.8 mile per hour. We'll cut off mile per hour. The highest velo. This is consistent when we go back to four seamers as well. Average usage, hard velo. You know, it's interesting to me, especially when you then see fastballs, and we'll toggle off. No fill there, and we'll find LA right here. And you can obviously peruse, like, keep your eyes on any other team here. And in the comments, like, feel free to let me know what you find interesting or you notice through piecing this all together. I'm just highlighting the teams that I find the most interesting. Dodgers fastballs. Yeah, they throw a good amount of them, I believe, right? Yeah, they're top third of the league, top maybe even quarter. Again, velo, number 1, 93.1, just above the Cubs. Highest fastball. We'll go four seam. I keep saying fastball. I usually, when I say fastball, I usually mean four seam. 93.1. Cool. That's the consistency we're going to see here. The other thing I want to point out with the Dodgers specifically is the shape of these fastballs. Generally, from my experience looking at data, if you're in a major league organization and you're not throwing hard, you probably have good fastball shape. And the way I want to confirm this is just by looking at the average of the teams towards the bottom in terms of velocity. We'll go like the bottom 4. 17.1 inches induced for VM up here is induced vertical break, right? How much are you resisting the force of gravity by? 17 inches. That ball is resisting the force of gravity on the way to the plate by 17 inches on average. For the bottom 3 teams in velocity, it's around 17.1. The Dodgers have 1.5, 2 miles per hour extra velocity. And again, slightly lower than 69. Okay, not as big of a difference as I thought. But the key thing I just want to point out is that generally in my head, as velocity increases, vertical movement is perhaps not as high for the most part, right? If you think of the selection bias, survivorship bias of players in the league who are throwing at low velocity probably have something unique going on. Most of the time that is interesting fastball shape. Most of the time that's carry, which is your vertical movement column right here. You get the Dodgers, you get a really wacky combination of great velocity and also great fastball shape. I don't believe there's another team. Kansas City is actually kind of interesting in here. They've gotten some crap for not being good at developing pitching, but they have hard velo and high vertical movement. That's maybe a sign of things to come. Not surprising to see the Rays there, 92. But the Dodgers, again, we're talking small margins here. But I do think it's important to point out that the Dodgers throw fastballs hard, throw sliders hard, and also get a lot of carry on their fastballs. I believe the Dodgers have the inverse approach of the Mariners in terms of development. The Mariners, I think, work back from the slider. I think the Dodgers work from the fastball. I think they understand that it's hard to fix a bad fastball. You know, you could just say, I see it all the time online, just change the shape, you know, tweak this, tweak that. That is substantially harder to do, I think, than people account for, such that the Dodgers, I think, are really integrated in scouting, player acquisition, and player development, such that they just want better fastballs, get good fastballs in the organization. We can figure out everything beyond that, right? If you have a good fastball, and you're behind the ball a lot, you might be limited in the secondaries you're able to create. But I don't think the Dodgers care about that. I think they understand maybe the more the nuance between orientation, how to get guys to good pitches, how to utilize cutters effectively. Their short baby sweeper, which I'll call like a Dodger slider, is very different and contrasting from some of the larger sliders in baseball. They work from fastball forward, I think. I think the Mariners work from slider back for the most part. Organizationally, high level. Again, we're not talking specific pitchers here. We're talking 4 levels of information here. This is very like org philosophy based, which could, again, be different than how you want to develop starting pitchers. But those are my takeaways from the Dodgers. The Guardians are another team, a little different, and cool. They are interesting because we'll keep it on fastball. We'll go usage. I can even maybe go Guardians Rays here. This is comparable for the most part. They do have some similar strategies, in my opinion. Rays have a little more velo. We could even we'll keep it on Guardians. We'll stick to Guardians. Guardians, highest fastball usage. Okay, interesting. This goes back to a point that maybe perhaps I'm gonna have to go orange here. That's a weird color, but we're gonna go with it. Maybe perhaps they want to encourage velocity development by throwing fastball more, which is something I've heard recently in relation to a few other organizations that I find interesting, because I've heard it and then I talked to other people about it and I got pushback because they were like, it doesn't really make sense, because, you know, I don't necessarily think encouraging fastball usage increases velocity in the long term. Whereas there's another contrasting part that thinks that it does. More fastball, more velo encourages velo development later in career. I'm not sure. That's a Guardians philosophy, it seems to me. They're the best team in baseball at developing velocity. There's some stories about this, I believe. I don't remember the writer's name for The Athletic. I think it's Zach Meisel, maybe. Did a really good story about this in relation to Joey Cantillo. Unfortunately, I don't think he really got to the brunt of the point. But that's not his fault. I just think the Guardians are really closed off as an organization in terms of what they value and talk about. I think that they were just ahead on a lot of topics from biomechanical standpoint development, and they just get it more than anyone. I also think maybe they have a little bit of that, you know, you're going to get better when you go to that organization, so there's maybe an easier level to get behind because they have really long track record of developing starting pitchers. When you have that, I think it's easier to then point to your 4 starters at the major league level who you've all developed: Bybee, Gavin Williams, Logan Allen. You know, Joey Cantillo is going to be up there at some point. Just a lot of guys in that past, Shane Bieber, and be like, those guys did what we're doing right now, so you need to do this, as opposed to like looking at a team like the Athletics at the major league level and going, who are these starters? And them going, you need to do this. I don't know how as a player you would listen to the Athletics versus listening to the Guardians. Fastball usage really high. So highest fastball usage, highest four-seam usage. At 50%. That's crazy. Believe they're also highest four-seam carry. Second highest four-seam carry, tied. So go four-seam carry. That's, again, I think those are somewhat related for the most part. Lower velocity, if you're valuing fastball shape still, it's going to result in good carry. Yeah, that's, I think, the only thing I wanted to point out with the Guardians. Just a lot of four-seam fastballs and a lot of carry. And they are really good at developing velocity, so much so that they will intake really low velocity, as you're seeing right here, into their organization, and then put them through their development plans and get them to the point where I actually think they are slightly below average at the major league level in terms of velocity, but their average major league four-seam velocity, I think, is around 93.5, 94, which is like 2.5 ticks higher than the minors, which is, I believe, one of the largest gaps in Major League Baseball. So just some objective, you know what, maybe I want to pull that up quick and prove it out. No, I won't prove it out. I'm confident in saying that they're maybe not the highest fastball velo at the major league level, but developing velo, they are the best in the minors. And we can see that proven out kind of counterintuitively by showing you they actually don't have a lot of velocity in the minors, such that when you get to the major league level, there's almost an assumption your velocity will increase, as we've seen with Gavin Williams this year. We've seen it with Tanner Bybee. I think we saw it with Logan Allen too. These guys just incrementally improve velocity. Also odd to me that Shane Bieber has dropped over the last couple of years. Really good. Yeah, there's just, again, some competing thoughts. So let's recap quickly. Mariners, low four seam release, highest sinker, most slider. I think they're valuing slider, they're valuing the low release, get around the ball, throw the best pitch most often. Dodgers are contrasting. I think they're working backwards from the fastball. Highest four slider velo, highest four seam velo. They're throwing the ball hard, and they're throwing a reasonable amount of fastballs. Give me a good fastball shape, let me work off that. Guardians, really high four seam usage, second highest four seam carry. We're very confident we can develop the velocity. That's maybe where I'll put. I think they're second lowest four seam velo at 91.6. Cool. Orioles, we'll go a little more results based here. You might be watching this entire video and going, I don't care about the shapes there, I want to see results. I got results for you. So we could go organizational FIP and ERA. Again, 4 levels between Class A and AAA. And we're looking at FIP here. And the number 1 team in baseball is the Baltimore Orioles. 4.26, where the league average is 4.69. Some oddity in here with homers and how that affects teams, especially in higher altitudes. So I want to exercise a little bit of caution on teams like Arizona, Oakland, Colorado. I believe are 3 teams that all play in Pacific Coast League and have some stadiums at elevation. So I wish I could almost come up with a stat that removes the homer aspect and tries to pull batted balls out a little bit to isolate off what they're doing from a control standpoint of strikeouts and walks, which I have right here. But the problem is none of them are really strong, so it almost makes me think that this is indicative of something. Those teams are not doing good from a FIP standpoint. They're all above 5, which isn't strong. The Orioles, however, have the best FIP in the minors at 4.26. This is really good. And the interesting thing, though, if you remember going back to what we were just looking at, the shapes, we didn't really pull out Baltimore in anything, right? Really good fastball shape. They don't throw it a ton. Let me untoggle Cleveland. So good fastball. Let me just go here. Let me toggle this off. We'll go dark or orange. Baltimore. Okay. Let's just toggle through and see. 4 seam. Good vertical. Where are they on extension? Okay. Up there in extension. Interesting. It's a good vertical, good extension. Their velo, I think, is kind of okay in the middle. Middle of the road. They don't really do too much, I believe, with sliders. Wacky. Let me untoggle LA. And let me pull Baltimore. Where's Baltimore? There. Okay. Baltimore. Boom. Boom. We'll go usage first. Are they high in slider usage? They're below right around average slider usage. They are low velo sliders. Interesting. This is now this extension. Slider extension is probably still high. Yeah, it's going to be correlated to the prior one. Release height, a little low. They don't really do anything too crazy, right? Let me see what they have on sinkers. We looked at Seattle with sinkers. I don't know where they are. Actually, I prepped some of this, but I didn't prep other parts. Ooh, I unfortunately deleted a team. Now let's see if we can find who that is. My bad. Let's see. Baltimore. Sinkers. Not a lot. 5%. Really low, actually. So bottom. Best FIP, so bottom. We'll go bottom 3. Sinker usage. 5% is really low. So they really like carry 4 seams. I wonder if they like cutters. Maybe that's what I'm missing. Velo low here. Vertical movement low. That makes some sense given release height. You're not behind the ball as much. Sinker. Let's go to cutter. I wonder if they're high on cutter usage. We're thinking through this one together as opposed to the others. Cutter. No, they're not high on cutter usage either. They're right around average, it looks. No, they're slightly above average. I don't want to call that out. Low velo. Decent amount of backspin. Reasonable. Yeah, we'll talk about the Yankees in a sec. High cutter usage there. Vertical movement. Curveballs? Come on, give me something with Baltimore here. 8%. So it's gotta be change-ups then, maybe? They're kind of just like a middle-of-the-road team. They're hard to piece out, honestly. Curveballs, they're, again, slightly below on velocity. 8%. Just not seeing much here. Change-ups? Are we Baltimore change-ups, a change-up factory? Let's see. Descending. No, not again. So Baltimore's just, it's kind of fascinating to me on Baltimore. I wonder, this might be a hot take, but maybe they're the team in baseball every team in the minor leagues, I feel like when I've talked to coaches and stuff, says we're individual in terms of our approach to player development. And I've heard that so many times that, and from different orgs, that I know to some extent it's true, but also that there's probably a lot more going on behind the scenes in terms of what they actually value. And what they're actually good at is maybe the distinction there. I wonder whether Baltimore is the rare team that is actually doing that well in isolating off what a player actually does well. Because they're getting great results and they're not really outlier in anything. They're kind of just middle of the pack, slightly above. They're not huge velo, you know, not a ton of fastballs. They're not really doing anything that like really screams to me that this is like a crazy organization in terms of what they're doing. Like it's all pretty average. It's actually below average velo, and yet the results are fantastic. So is this we call it like the Goldilocks zone? I've heard this in scouting. Goldilocks zone? Perhaps, and this has been one of your sample. Maybe they play in parks that suppress homers, etc. There's some variables here. I don't want to give them all the credit. I think this is a little biased because they have done really well at the major league level developing talent. And they made some acquisitions that I think are sharp, which prove that they probably have an idea what's going on in the minors and can isolate that off. Maybe they're the Goldilocks team. I don't think I'm gonna have thoughts on fastball sliders. Let's just keep talking teams. Let's talk Yanks quick. The Yanks are a weird one. They are very weird. I believe, let's see slider first. I think they're a slider team. Sliders. Yankees throw a lot of sliders. Yankees throw a lot of sweepers. I did a video a while back on what I call the Dodger slider versus the Yankee slider. Two different pitches. Essentially, Yankee slider is a big sweeper. They give that to pretty much everybody. And as much as teams say they don't give it to everyone in the organization, I do think a lot of teams just copy paste it into an organization. And that gets back to our point about, you know, we're doing everything to help the player on the individualistic side. And I agree. I do think teams actually try to do that. I just don't know if they are successful in doing that. Perhaps the Orioles are the exception. The Yankees take a much more simple approach of just, we will throw a lot of sliders, as you see right here. Upper bound, not crazy above average, but definitely above average. I don't think they have a lot of backspin on them either. Yeah, average backspin. Lower velocity too, which implies I think these are sweeping more. I don't have horizontal in here, but I would bet they're top 5 to 6 in amount of horizontal movement they're generating. Lower release height as well, lines up for 5'7". Lower release height lines up with, not the Mariners in terms of how low, but comparable. They're throwing a lot of sweepers. The interesting thing about them though, and it's cutters. So they're a really heavy team in terms of cutter usage, which I find interesting because I've always thought of cutters as what you'd call like a finishing pitch or a polish pitch. Because most of the time what you're doing, this is my baseball with the cutter, is taking a four-seam orientation. Say the guy has closed fingers, let's say he's thumb under. And you're kind of offsetting in some direction. Probably something like this or that. Such that when you're ripping the ball, it's creating a little less efficient spin, therefore less backspin, more drop, a little bit of cut. I don't want to say it's an easy pitch to teach. I've never taught a guy at the major league level a cutter, so I don't know. But in talking to coaches, they generally think that cutters are easy to add late. So I think that maybe is why some teams just don't really care about them in the minors, perhaps. Some of the smarter teams too, like Cleveland throws 3%, yet they have some guys at the major league level throwing them. Cubs are 4%. Every team here is just kind of low. The Yankees are interesting though because they're at 12%, so they're higher relative to the average, almost by double. They throw twice as many cutters as other organizations. Cutters are generally in repertoires, especially when a guy throws a sweeper. Sweepers aren't as effective opposite-handed. So I'm a right-handed pitcher throwing a sweeper to a lefty. It's not going to be as effective of an offering as if I were to spin a cutter or something more vertical, less relative horizontal aggregate movement. And it makes sense from a minor league development standpoint, I think, to go, okay, these sweeper guys are the ripping sweepers to righties, and then we need to teach them something on the cutter side to lefties to get lefties out. Or we need to teach them something to get lefties out, and therefore they lean on the cutter. So I wonder whether the Yankees just advance development a little quicker, if that makes any sense. Like they just are more willing to give the pitcher a finishing pitch now. And I'm fine with that. Like, first principles perspective of why less spin-induced movement is easier to control generally has to do with the fact of, like, think of stabilization of flight of a baseball. Think stabilization of flight of a bullet coming out of a gun, rifling. Rifling was invented to keep bullet trajectory relatively stable. Before that, it was going everywhere. So very basic concept of just this ball spinning more like a bullet. I think I will have better command of that baseball relative to my other pitches and relative to who I am as a pitcher. Such that you know, you don't, I don't know. The cutter added early, maybe they see something where that pitch needs more time in a repertoire to get good and maybe not leak as much arm side if you're trying to go in on a lefty or something along those lines. But I'd also think that you could add it late, sticking to what I heard from other orgs, because of that concept of like this guy spinning everything, carrying everything, big fade change, he's not around the zone, he's not around the zone. And then you give him something with some more stabilization in flight, and it's like, oh, my zone rate on that's like 50-55%. It's above average relative to everything else. That cutter can live in my repertoire. It induces weak contact, etc. So that's interesting to me. I know they're a sweeper org, and I know they throw a lot of cutters. I just wonder whether they do it earlier than other teams. This is related specifically to cutter. So let's tie that point there. Do they throw the cutter earlier than other teams? Perhaps. It's an interesting point. I'm not entirely sure. It's a thought I had. It makes sense in my head. So those are kind of the 5 teams I wanted to hit on. I don't even know if I have time to hit on... I'm going to try to keep this video shorter, but there's some other teams that just don't do a good job. I don't like ripping orgs because I have some contacts in other orgs and stuff, but I don't know. I think you could probably pretty easily just look at it. Let's just look at it like based on... I'll just give you like a really quick summary of the teams that I just don't think do a good job at anything. You could probably just, honestly, let's just look at results. Like, we don't even need to go off anything aside from results. I think you hit on a lot of the bad teams down here. Let's go. These 4 teams are probably the worst. 1, 2, 3. I think Houston's better. Cincinnati's better. Bad results on them. These are probably your worst 4 teams. Arizona's tough for me. I'm not entirely sure where that org's going. I don't have many contacts there, so I'm not entirely sure. But these are probably your worst. Angels don't have good player development in the minor leagues, from my understanding. Colorado is Colorado. They have no analytics department. The White Sox are kind of in turmoil, and the Athletics are not good. And that's just simply pulled through FIP. You know, they're just not getting good results. You know, they're not really striking out a lot of guys. They're walking a lot. I would bet all of those teams are probably low fastball velo. We could find that out. Oakland, Nationals are another bad team. Anaheim, yep. Chicago White Sox, yep. Who am I missing? Colorado, actually decent fastball velo. That's encouraging. Good job, Colorado. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't want to bash the teams that are bad. I think this is just your 4. This is your not doing great at player development in the minor leagues on the pitching side. Just from talking to people around the league and knowing who's in those departments, even though I don't really have contacts in any of those orgs. Actually, I do. Never mind. I'll take that back. But on the minor league side, pitching side specifically, just do not do a good job. And we can prove that out in the FIP. And it's 1-year FIP. Maybe it improves. Year-over-year improvement's really important. You know, I want to jump back to this probably in another year or 2 and see how teams are doing. These are my teams, though. I hope you hung with me here and it wasn't too boring. If you have any thoughts, I'm actually very curious. If you saw your team on the left here or are interested in where your team falls on any of these metrics, let me know and I'll toss it in the comments and let you know. But these are our 5 takeaways. And it really is fun to think about how minor league organizations are operated from the pitching development side and what they value and why they value it. And hopefully you learned something in this video. Thanks for watching.